tools of writing merited notice. And I've spoken last year on the Humanities Center in detail about this textbook. This is a 17th century Latin and English textbook by Johann Comenius, designed for young scholars to read in the vernacular in Latin. The book connects the student to his entire physical world, from animals to objects to weather. Within this world of concrete objects, the media of learning are always foregrounded. The section on paper here highlights its manufacture from raw materials, that on printing, the workers, and the mechanical tools and technologies. A book is described as a series of component parts, leaves of various sizes, and he talks about folio, quarto, etc. String, clips, which must be placed together by the work of the bookbinder. The most pertinent scene for understanding the early modern technology-intensive conception of education, though, is this picture of the scholar. And Comenius says, and this is for students to read by, it's here in English and Latin, "The study is the place where a student, apart from men, sitteth alone, addicted to his studies, whilst he readeth his books, which being within his reach, he layeth open upon a desk, and picketh all the best things out of them into his own manual, or marketh them with a dash or a little star in the margin. Being to sit up late, as many of us might have been last night, he setteth a candle on a candlestick, which is snuffed with snuffers. Before the candle he places a screen, which is green, that it may not hurt his eyesight. Richer persons use a taper, for a tallow candle smoketh." It is clear from the scene that a number of tools and embodied techniques enable the learning process. However, in the 100 years following the publication of Orbis Pictus, a cultural amnesia seems to set in. Thus we have, and this is then post-Kant, Isaac Disraeli, the father of the British Prime Minister, Benjamin Disraeli, commenting on the King James anecdote I earlier mentioned. But he uses this anecdote instead to mock writing masters. Had this anecdote of neat writing reached the professors of calligraphy, who in this country have put forth such painful panegyrics on the art, these royal names had unquestionably blazoned their pages. Not, indeed, that these penmen require any fresh inflation, for never has there been a race of professors in any art who have exceeded in solemnity and pretensions the practitioners in this simple and mechanical craft. I must leave to more ingenious investigators of human nature to reveal the occult cause which has operated such powerful delusions on these vive la plume men, who have been generally observed to possess least intellectual ability and apportion to the excellence they have obtained in their own art. It will surprise some when they learn that the artists in versic colors, poets and painters, have not raised loftier pretensions to the admiration of mankind. So this dismissal of the art and craft of penmanship is set forth in terms of class hierarchies as well as emerging notions of high art as opposed to these artisan employments. This degrading of the role of the hand, the tool, and specific media in creation and sustaining of knowledge was discounted by educators as well. For example, Glasgow professor of logic and rhetoric, George Jardine, complained in 1818 about students taking notes in class. We could only hope for notes, right? But he doesn't like it. This practice is attended with many objections, for being constantly occupied with the mechanical operation of transferring the words of the lecturer into his notebook, the mind of the student receives scarcely any ideas connected with the subject under discussion, and is altogether removed from that active and strenuous exertion of its powers, upon which the formation of all valuable intellectual habits is found chiefly to depend. The voluminous writer is commonly less acquainted than others with the facts and reasonings which he has committed to paper. And when he leaves college, accordingly, his portfolio, and not his memory, contains the chief part of the instruction which he carries away. The student, in other words, has become, in this model, a mere machine, impressing ideas onto a book, after all, the most common receptacle for ideas, and not his brain. The copying hand itself is no longer considered the appropriate tool for learning. Such dismissal of the work of the tool in the body is not limited to the 19th century. I recently read an op-ed piece by an English professor who is also, as it happens, the mother of a child struggling to learn cursive. In her article, she protests, "Let's stop brutalizing our kids with years of drills on the proper formation of the cursive capital S. Handwriting is a historical blip in the long history of writing technologies, and it's time to consign to the trash heap this artificial way of making letters, along with clay tablets, smoke signals, and other arcane technologies." I might point out here that the designation of artificial here is a bit odd, considering that we might label every form of letter making artificial, or just as easily label them all natural. Surely each so-called arcane technology has its moments of being both. Moreover, and more to the point, perhaps, there is a growing educational and neurological evidence that the mind-body tool connection is more profound than a list of outdated media would suggest. That as it turns out, handwriting fluency is a fundamental building block of learning. A 2007 national study funded by the US Department of Education, for example, noted that when children were given a mere 15 minutes of handwriting instruction 3 times a week, after nine weeks, they doubled their writing speed and their expressed thoughts were more complex. Sentence construction skills also improved. This increased writing was also shown to improve reading. Like Comenius' scholar who copies his notes into a manual or marks his books with a star or dash in the margins, we might do well to start thinking about our physical interactions with the tools of reading. One of my favorite reading devices, for example, one that I share with many of you, is not the Kindle. The Post-it note. Serving as a combination margin amplifier and color-coded bookmark, it allows us to intervene and interact with our text, in remembering them. They are, in fact, organizational commonplace books that parasitically attach to our books. They are portable thinking machines, detachable enactments of memory and imagination. In other words, they are powerful tools for learning. Unfortunately, they are also ephemeral, fading, falling out, wrinkling beyond all recognition. And actually, I left it in my briefcase, but I did bring in my teaching copy of Jane Eyre, which is exploding. It's not what this neat. It is just exploding with faded, wrinkled Post-it notes, torn, etc. Understanding the book as a system that can be used with other tools and technologies is important for understanding education in the 21st century. What sorts of thinking is allowed, enabled, and encouraged? What is the rhetoric of the technology? How is it promoted? How does the machine see us? The Kindle, you knew I had to get there, for example, has to date been selling itself as a passive reading device, perfect for the beach and other forms of recreational reading. Importantly, the Kindle does allow annotation. This is an example of its annotation ability. It does allow annotation and bookmarking, but the keyboard is uncomfortably small and the resulting notes are subordinated to the larger text. The iPad may seem further removed from the possibilities of build-up. After the first buzz of its arrival died down, it was critiqued as being primarily an entertainment device. So, do you want to play tap-tap on a huge freaking screen? Do you like laptops but don't like, I can't read that, but yeah, you don't need a keyboard, and so on. Interestingly, after this critique, the current spate of TV commercials emphasizes the creative possibilities of users. Cooking, drawing, making music, studying, learning, etc. And I brought that, but it's only a couple seconds, but I won't show it now. I'm running out of time. If you watch TV at night at all, you've seen this hundreds of times. Yet despite this attempt to brand the iPad as a creative space, out of the top 20 paid apps this week, and I did my own research, 17 were entertainment-oriented. Critics of the iReader app further argue that the iPad is not well designed for the reading of long works, faulting its heavy size and bright screen. Notice that these are physical attributes. The screen real estate devoted to reading and app among apps suggests that the iPad values multitasking as short bursts of attention, which recent cognitive studies suggest do not favor long-term attention. Nonetheless, the iAnnotation application, specifically designed for PDFs, looks to be very robust, and at 99 cents is a heck of a lot cheaper than Post-it notes. I'm not trying to resolve the issues of these two platforms today. This is not pro-Kindle, pro-book, pro-iPad. I'm just beginning to sketch the ways we might analyze the physical, the technological, the embodied, the entire system of literacy that extends out of the classroom and into commercial realms, whether we like it or not, such as Amazon and Apple. If the industrial age spawned fears of the Fordist factory production model of education, in which students are turned out like widgets, the model for tomorrow may be the cyborg, in which students blend seamlessly into their machines. Both draw on and exploit fears of the educational machine. These fears are not ungrounded, but they do prevent a full analysis of the perils and the promises of the future. Only by embracing the possibilities of a post-rational, even post-human technologies of Bildung can we grapple with our role as educators in this brave new world. To mash up two of my favorite critics, Andy Clark and Catherine Hales, we have always been cyborgs, a seamless blending of flesh and machine, a system within a system. Understanding that education and its subjects have always been products of a human-machine interface, in other words, that Bildung has always been mediated, allows us to more carefully examine our own transitional moment and to rethink free thinking. Thank you.
5 minutes, please.
Yes. And just to, since I started with a continental philosopher, I didn't read this in your own time, but there's this great quote by Deleuze about the reading machine. But I'll take questions. Yes?
Yes, the Sapir a day. How is that broken down? Literally, what is it translate to?
Dare to know. Jamie? Latin?
Yes.
All day is the dare? Or
Yeah.
all
All day is
day?
dare, there is to know.
Okay.
So it's an
Thank you.
imperative and an infinitive.
Thank you.
Yes, Bear?
How does grammar intersect with the orthopedics of penmanship and creative function?
It's usually treated as a separate subject in the same books. So it's interesting when you study what now, I mean, high schools call the language arts. They kind of combine and recombine and separate out and then merge back together in different works and different periods, even within one century, such as the 18th century. So sometimes you have books that have grammar, spelling, reading, and sometimes it's really different. I mean, then as now, there were different schools of thoughts on how to learn. Some of them seem quite familiar to ours. Some of them are about, some are prescriptive, some are descriptive. There's arguments about what's the best method.
Do you think Kant would have thought of grammar as a technology?
Do I think he saw?
Yeah, right. In other words, would grammar have been a form of mediation?
I can't speak to
Yeah, right.
Kant, really.
It's just sort of another question. I mean, would grammar have been a technology in a sense?
Right. I would say, was it viewed as a